In the small town of Brooksville, a sinister atmosphere loomed over the old abandoned circus tent on the outskirts. The faded colors of the torn canvases and the ghostly sounds of the wind blowing through the masts gave that structure an air of desolation and horror. There was a legend that haunted the local inhabitants for decades, a story whispered in tones of fear and disbelief: the killer clown. It was said that he was a circus performer who went mad after a terrible accident that killed his family and colleagues. Since then, he had lurked in the shadows, waiting for his next victim. A group of brave teenagers decided to explore the abandoned tent on a dark night, challenging each other to face their fears. They entered the place with flickering lanterns, nervously laughing to disguise the anxiety consuming them. As they advanced through the dusty corridors, the air grew heavier and more oppressive. The sound of footsteps echoing in the distance made their hearts race, but they insisted on continuing. That's when they began to find disturbing clues: dried bloodstains on the floor, fresh footprints amidst the dust, and finally, a note written in blood red, which read, "You're next." Panic seized the group, and they desperately tried to find a way out. But it seemed like the tent had a mind of its own, changing shape and guiding them deeper into the darkness. That's when the first of them disappeared. A piercing scream tore through the air, echoing through the walls of the tent. But when the friends rushed to investigate, they only found a puddle of blood on the ground. Terror gripped them as they realized they were being hunted by something beyond comprehension. The killer clown emerged from the shadows, his smeared makeup and sinister laughter echoing through the environment. He toyed with his prey, watching with pleasure as they desperately tried to escape his deadly clutches. The night dragged on, immersed in an endless nightmare of blood, terror, and madness. The survivors knew their only hope was to find a way to defeat the killer clown before he found them first. But would they manage to escape alive from the cursed tent? Or would they become just another gruesome tale to haunt the hearts of those who dared to defy the unknown? The remaining teenagers, now reduced to a small, trembling group, knew they needed to act quickly. As they crept through the dark corridors of the tent, they desperately searched for an exit, any break in the darkness that would offer them a chance of survival. Every shadow seemed to conceal the killer clown, and every echoing laugh made them tremble with fear. Their minds began to falter under the weight of terror, but they knew they couldn't give up, not as long as there was even a slight chance of escaping. In a moment of despair, they found a partially open door in the deepest recesses of the tent. A faint light shone beyond it, offering a promise of safety. With their hearts in their throats, they hesitantly advanced, fearing it might be just another trap set by the killer clown. As they stepped through the door, they were greeted by a terrifying sight. Before them was a room illuminated by candles, with walls adorned with twisted images of smiling and sinister clowns. In the center of the room, a sinister altar stood, covered with ancient artifacts and even denser candles. A whisper echoed through the room, sending shivers down the survivors' spines. And then, from the shadows, the killer clown emerged, his grotesque figure twisted into a sickening smile. He stared at them with empty eyes, emanating a presence that seemed to suck the life out of the room. Before they could react, the room filled with a deafening laughter, a cacophony of madness that made them scream in terror. The killer clown advanced slowly, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the night, as the teenagers retreated, cornered by their own anguish. What would happen next was beyond human understanding, beyond the limits of reason and sanity. But one thing was certain: the night was far from over, and the killer clown was hungry for more blood. The horror was just beginning, and the fate of the young ones was sealed in the hands of the incarnate evil that hunted them mercilessly. The killer clown advanced slowly towards the teenagers, his sinister smile widening as he drew closer. His empty eyes seemed to pierce the souls of those who dared to confront him, as he surrounded them with a suffocating presence of terror. Desperate, the young ones frantically searched for a way to escape, but it felt like they were trapped in a labyrinth of nightmares, with no way out in sight. Each step the killer clown took echoed like a hammer pounding in their hearts, announcing their imminent doom. Then, in a moment of pure agony, one of the teenagers spotted a door at the back of the room, a break in the darkness offering a small glimmer of hope. With a cry of despair, she pointed towards the exit, urging the others to follow her. They ran as if their lives depended on it, fear propelling them forward as the killer clown roared with anger behind them. Each step was a desperate race for survival, each breath a silent scream for help in a world where evil reigned supreme. Finally, they reached the door and threw it open with all their might, hurling themselves out of the chamber of horror and into the relative safety outside the tent. The night was cold and dark, but the feeling of freedom was intoxicating, even if it was only temporary. They ran without looking back, daring not to think about what they left behind in that cursed place. But deep down in their hearts, they knew that the killer clown still lurked in the shadows, waiting for his next opportunity to terrorize and kill. The story of the killer clown still echoed in the minds of the survivors, haunting their dreams and chilling their thoughts. For they knew that as long as evil existed in the world, horror would never be far away, patiently waiting for its next unsuspecting victim. The survivors were never the same after that fateful night in the killer clown's tent. The terror they faced left deep scars on their minds and hearts, forever changing them. Some struggled to find peace and normalcy in their lives, haunted by vivid memories of what they witnessed. Others desperately sought answers, delving into research about the circus tent's dark past and the mysteries it harbored. But despite their efforts, the killer clown remained an enigma, a sinister figure that continued to haunt the small town of Brooksville and its inhabitants. His legacy of terror lived on beyond that night, echoing through time as a grim warning of the darkness that resides in the human heart. And so, the story of the killer clown became an urban legend, whispered in fearful tones around campfires and on moonlit nights. But for those who lived to tell the tale, it was more than just a simple horror story. It was a vivid reminder that in the dark world we live in, evil lurks in every shadow, waiting for its chance to emerge and spread terror upon the innocent. And thus, as long as the killer clown remained in the memories of those who faced him, his presence would continue to haunt the town of Brooksville, a grim reminder that evil is never far away, always lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself.